Welcome to the Real Life, Real Kitchen podcast. Real talk for curious mums reclaiming food, family, and community. I'm Zoe F. Willis, English mother of many, mentor to mums. And if you're reheating your tea again, this is your place. So pop the kettle on as each week I chat with folks who feed, heal, and hold our communities together. You don't need perfection to pull up a chair, just curiosity and the courage to ask, what if there's another way?
And welcome to the Real Life, Real Kitchen podcast. I want to say thank you so much for joining us this week. We've got Laura Bloomberg, founder of Dyslexia Understood, very special guest who has had over 30 years teaching experience in both English state and private schools. She's a specialist dyslexic teacher and previously a dyslexia assessor. At the moment, she works with local authorities, schools and parents, helping them to remove barriers for learning for pupils with specific learning difficulties. She's also an accredited trainer on the evidence-based inference training, reading comprehension intervention program, and she delivers training online in the UK and internationally. She's also delivered level 5 OCR diploma in teaching learners with dyslexia and specific learning difficulties, and was a visiting lecturer at the University of Hertfordshire in the School of Education. Along with the many other hats that Laura wears, she's also a qualified NLP mindset coach, EFT practitioner, and a hypnotherapist. And later in the year, we are going to be talking with Laura in her capacity as a infertility coach. So something to look forward to in the future. But for now, we're going to be talking about dyslexia. The reason I'm coming to this is because, as many of the listeners and readers of my blog will know, I'm homeschooling and I have a range of abilities with the children. Having not been a trained teacher, it's been so interesting to come across the different ways that children learn. So I thought it'd be quite wonderful to have Laura on and ask questions. But first of all, Laura, you've had a lot of time as a teacher, but how did you come to actually specialize in dyslexia?
Well, thank you so much, Zoe, for that lovely introduction. And there's not much more I can add to about my background, more than what you've already just said. But how I got into dyslexia in the first place was when I had I started a family. I was working in the private sector, and when I returned to work, they weren't overly keen on me continuing to be a class teacher on a part-time basis. So they asked me if I would be able to work alongside the special needs coordinator and help support her, as well as set up an English as an additional language department within the school, because we had a lot of overseas international students who would come in with absolutely no English. So I shared an office space with the Senko, and I would see what she was doing with helping support learners with specific learning difficulties and dyslexia and dyscalculia. And that's where my interest and passion grew from there. So I then trained myself to become a dyslexia specialist teacher, and then went on to become a dyslexia specialist assessor. And that's where the passion started. And I haven't looked back ever since.
Do you know what? I love that. This is one of the stories that keeps on popping up with the women I talk to. What life changes. One door closes.
Yeah, bit of sliding doors. Yes.
You've got no idea what's going to be on the other side.
No.
That's beautiful, and also the fact that you've fitted it around the children, and then these other doors opened up.
Absolutely.
So, over your time, because with dyslexia, it is a learning difficulty. I'm going to use inverted commas. It is a learning difficulty.
It is.
Now,
yes.
I just want to say apologies if I'm using like incorrect terms, if I sound like some sort of 19th century colonialist. Apologies.
No, not at all.
So please,
not at all.
Please. Correct me, and if necessary. So dyslexia is, in inverted commas, a learning difficulty.
It is. It comes under the umbrella category of SPLD, which is specific learning difficulties. So when we talk about specific, we're looking at dyslexia, we're looking at dyscalculia, and we're looking at dyspraxia, and then there's also dysgraphia. Okay, so these are all your the word dys, it comes from a Greek origin, but the word dys means difficulty, and then obviously lexia with the written or the language, right. The calculia, the number, praxia with the coordination, and graphia with the writing. So those are what we call the specific learning difficulties. However, specific learning difficulties and what the word neurodiversity all fit together as well, because it's important to appreciate that there's an overlap. Okay. Yes, we might just have one area of difficulty or one area of a co-occurring difficulty as well, but generally there's often an overlap. And the term neurodiversity encompasses all the specific learning difficulties that I just talked about, as well as ASD, which is autism spectrum disorder, SLI, specific language impairment, ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, or ADHD. So it encompasses, and the implications are really far-reaching, because if each pupil is a mix of different aspects of SBLD or neurodiverse, it means that we can't necessarily assume anything. And we need to know what their profile is in order to give them the correct support, intervention, and help that meets their own specific needs.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, one of the first things that kind of springs to mind is with something like the autism. If you're in a really overstimulating environment, that's obviously going to have effects on
processing, hearing, absorbing, memory, everything. There's so many different elements of all the different areas that will impact. So some children are dyslexic with autistic tendencies, or have autism as well. There's a real overlap.
So interesting. So it's the beauty of the individual, isn't it? Each child, is just wonderfully complex and with their own personalities, temperaments, challenges. That's but what fascinating work, because I presume you are called in, you say, I have little Freddie. Freddie is struggling.
Yes.
And then you've got to kind of go, right, got to unpick.
Find out what So it's important, obviously, to get a detailed understanding of that child. And again, it depends. I support lots of schools now, sort of do online unnamed pupil surgeries, where a school or a teacher will come to me and say, I've got X, we're not allowed to mention names for data protection, year 5, struggling with reading or struggling with writing or spelling or memory, whatever it is. This is how they work in the classroom. And then they come to me with their concerns, and then I sit there and I work out, I give advice based on the information given to me on next best steps. So it's quite a wide range of support there.
That's amazing. That's incredible. And wonderful as well that the teachers are clocking and going, right, this particular child needs that something different.
Yes.
And then with your years of experience, you're able to say, right, I'm seeing the patterns. This is what needs to be applied.
Yeah.
So, okay. So I have a question, actually, a bit of a tangent. Boredom.
Yes.
Is that something that you're going to, I presume that's going to be part of the tapestry, because if you've got a child who has got a lot going on visually, they find that they can't read, they find the writing hard, the maths hard, whatever it is, and they're in a classroom.
The barrier's gone up. The barrier's gone up. It's more than boredom. It's not that they're listening, but they're just bored by what you're saying. They're not really. I mean, dyslexia is primarily a processing difficulty, which then affects the reading, the spelling, the writing, the memory. But if they're finding it hard to access either one or all of those areas, or some of those areas, the boredom will kick in, or the switch off will go. The barrier will go up, and they're just not going to be listening. They're not going to want to be engaged. So it's all about making sure that however we teach our children, ideally it's going to be in a multi-sensory way, that we're meeting their needs at where they are at, in the way that we present information, what we actually require them to do. It's like you going to a country that speaks another language. Let's go for Russia, or for any country. It doesn't matter which country it is. And you're put into a classroom, and the teacher's speaking Russian, and you're expected to engage in that classroom from 9 o'clock in the morning to 3:30 in the afternoon, or whether it's at home as well. and you're finding it difficult to understand what the teacher is saying, and if without the visual support or without the other support, you're just going to switch off after a minute because it's going to make no sense to you.
Yeah, and you also, and having been in that situation in other countries where I've had like basics of a language,
Yeah,
and you're surrounded by it, you are exhausted.
Oh,
you are so tired by the end because your brain is just like, what's going on, and trying to pick up on all the cues that will help.
Oh my gosh, you're exhausted, the memory the overload. And then what happens is these pupils get homework. So they're expected to come home and then do some more work at home. And that's often where parents receive the very unhappy, very traumatized or overwhelmed, exhausted, ratty, rude child, because they've had this whole day at school where they're trying to hold it together because they don't want to necessarily show that they're not coping in front of their peers or in front of the staff.
Yeah.
And then they come home, and that's where the behavior starts to kick off, whether it's after school or at the weekend. So yeah, it's a really fine balance. It's understanding how to support these pupils appropriately, and it's not always just about following the what we would call the norm. It's thinking outside the box and giving permission for teachers to find different ways of setting homework, maybe a game, or just something, or to watch something it doesn't always have to be putting that pen in their hands and writing or reading, and giving them something more to do that they're already struggling with.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I do with one of my children, who actually, I'll take it back a couple of steps. I had a conversation with this child, this was a few years ago, where I said, what happens when you're looking at the word on a page? Because I could see by this point, I was like, you're a bright child, but this is clearly a struggle for you.
Yeah.
And I asked, what's going on? And this child said, I can see the letters.
Yes.
And takes time to put them together.
Yeah.
But then when they're in a sentence, something happens. And I know that when you look at it, something happens, but that doesn't happen with me.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's really powerful. This realization that something's meant to happen,
but it's not quite. The neural pathways are not necessarily going in the same way as other people.
I'm not.
Yeah. A lot. There's a bit of a myth about letters on pages as well, sometimes getting mixed up with the way it gets with visual dyslexia, and that's not necessarily always the case. But it's often what causes weak or incomplete is the phoneme, the letter sound mapping. Okay, where it's the mapping between the speech sounds and spelling is not always fully there. And the brain has to work a lot harder, rely possibly on guesswork, and constantly self-correct. And that's exhausting a lot of the time. Yeah. So it's not necessarily, the problem is not mixed up letters and the way that you see them. It's the code that has not been made fully visible and learnable, if that makes sense.
It also doesn't help that English is that mixture between the Latin and the Germanic. Yeah. I mean,
it's a dreadful language, and we're expecting them. There's a beautiful poem that I show on when I do a presentation about reading, and we're expected children at the age of 5 to master the different same sort of sound patterns, but pronounced differently. It's a awful language, as in it's great language, but it's a very
I mean, English just being such a tricky language, it really is awkward. And again, because I've learned other languages, with them being phonetic, it just immediately means the code and you know how it's meant to be pronounced. So English is already that challenge. But I'm going to come back to this child who finds the words, or would say, something's meant to happen. Mm-hmm. So 2 things with this child. I then said to this wee one, you can look at a Lego brick and you see entire worlds.
Yeah.
I look at a Lego brick and I go,
Yes, exactly.
It's a bit of plastic that hurts when I stand on it. That's all I see. It's the different ways of looking at the world, looking at space, kind of processing ideas.
Having dyslexia is a superpower.
No. Some of the most interesting people I know.
Absolutely. And why is that? Because they're using our brain is divided into 2 hemispheres, and we would generally use the whichever side, depending on the activity that we're doing. But what happens is the wiring of the brain is slightly different in a dyslexic learner compared to a non-dyslexic learner. And what we're doing is we're tapping more into the right side of the brain, which is the more sort of the rhythm, the images, the color. And if you think about the people that perhaps you either know personally or famous people, Jamie Oliver, Winston Churchill, Cher, Muhammad Ali, Walt Disney, Hans Christian Andersen, all those people, plus many more, they're very creative. And they are famous for who they are possibly because of their dyslexia. So we say dyslexia is not oh gosh, it's dyslexic and shush it under the carpet. It's great. Let's celebrate it. It's a superpower, because actually you're going to have so many strengths that so many other people will either envy or not have at all. But it's about tapping in.
It's about tapping in and encouraging and acknowledging that there are different ways of thinking and seeing the world.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, one of the other things I have said to this child as well, because obviously you still get pushback, because unfortunately Lego is optional.
Yes.
The reading is not.
Yes.
It's not. So I still get the pushback. To which my observation is it is hard.
Really tricky.
But it's really tricky. But the blessing is, what hard work is. You will always know what it is, that there are things you will have to work hard for. For people who find other things really easy,
yes.
And there are a lot of people who thrive in the current academic situation, who can do an exam, bam, 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 bam. It's not a challenge. And when they come to a challenge later in life, they go, oh, this is hard, I'm not going to bother.
Yes. Yeah. You build up resilience.
Yes, you do.
From an early age.
You do.
If you're supported correctly and you're given the right guidance as well by the adult, whether it be the parent, the teacher, both, or whoever, and you learn to use your difficulties to your advantage, and you don't give up the minute you come across an issue that you can't cope with, then absolutely you're building skills from a really young, early age that's going to give you those important life skills later on.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you talked about in the brain with a child or a person who has this dyslexia, maybe a child, I'll go with a child, things are not kind of connecting. What anatomically, physically is happening? Or I don't know. What's the actual process?
That's a tricky one for me on this one. That's a whole presentation in itself. Well, where do we even start with this one?
So let's take it to a child who goes, oh, I can read, it's fine.
Yes.
What's happening in their brain?
Okay.
And then you have a child who's like, the word, it just, what's happening in their brain? The child who looks at the numbers, what's kind of going on?
It's all to do with the language processing in the brain. And it's a lot with in terms of reading, forget the number side for the moment. It's the dyslexic students are not necessarily reading by letter shape, and they're not necessarily randomly mixing letters in their heads. Skilled reading, let me put it this way, is driven by speech sounds mapped to spelling, not by if that makes sense. So
yes.
So it's to do with the code. We've got to make sure that the speech sounds are clear to them. Not quite sure if this is very clear how I'm describing it. It's quite scientifically based here. So yeah, we can't. Dyslexia is not a visual problem, which is a myth, which a lot of people think it's about. It's about so it's the underlying thing going on is about mapping speech sounds mapped to spelling. That a lot of the dyslexic learners struggle with doing that, and it's what we call the phonological loop as well, the appreciation of the sound structure of the English language, and they haven't got that ability to do that, and that needs support.
At that early age. I think and just from my observations, you're right. It's that visually, my particular children who find this a struggle, they've got no problems with visual stuff and pictures and all of this. That's fine. But it is taking that abstract concept of a couple of wiggles on a page and then turning it into the words, I don't know, occasion or something. How do the two connect? Whereas, and again, I'm going to come back to the child with the Lego and all of this, that child can listen to audiobooks now of Lord of the Rings.
Yes,
and it's in there.
Yes.
And I will sit and be doing, for example, the Latin or the grammar with him.
Yeah.
But it's all spoken. Because if we were to sit there and to write it, I get bored.
Is that transferring from what's going up in there onto paper as well, and mapping those speech sound, the speech sounds mapped to spelling. That's where they are struggling.
That's where it goes. But I just find it just so magnificent how they can hear something and it's in there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's just it's incredible. This whole kind of way of learning, how different people learn, it's
fascinating. It is fascinating. And again, really and not one size fits all. Just because you're dyslexic doesn't mean you necessarily are going to, the dyslexic, there's a bit of a wider new definition of dyslexia at the moment. It's not like you necessarily have to always struggle with reading or always struggle with spelling, or, you can have a dyslexic learner who's actually quite good at spelling, or a dyslexic learner who's good at reading, but it could be processing difficulties that are causing them the issue. There's been a new definition actually released this year. There's an updated definition of dyslexia, and it encompasses quite a lot of things, not just what one might necessarily have originally thought dyslexia is.
Yeah. So I'm going to come back to the support of the children.
Yeah.
We have an education system where there is, I've had struggles with it. This is why we're home educating. Mm-hmm. But there are particular goals children have to achieve at particular ages. There are exams children have to achieve by a particular age in order to get out in the world.
Yeah.
There isn't really the option to repeat a year.
No.
Not later. For the American listeners, children are starting primary school here at age 4.
Yes.
And not be turning
expected to do a lot when they start. Yeah. It's straight in. It's not even playtime. Yeah. It's straight into starting to learn phonics and
and there's pressure on that first year as well that they achieve particular phonic tests, because then the school's ranking in the local system is also affected.
In year one. Yeah. It's not really designed. The mainstream schools, there obviously are a few specialist schools, and obviously they will be specialist, but the mainstream schools and the general sort of educational system in large, let's put it that way, is not overly set up to support children with learning difficulties.
Yeah. What does that, I think we probably know the answer, but kind of long term for those children that fall through the cracks and are, as you described, switching off.
It's difficult. It creates a lot of problems. Sometimes parents are really on it, and then obviously, or can afford to get them extra support outside of school. Obviously, that's not the case for a lot of parents. So then again, that's difficult. Then you have behavioral problems manifesting, and it get back and obviously see new challenges as well as the existing ones. So it's about getting my dream would be to make sure that the educators, whether that's teachers, parents, both, are sufficiently empowered and given the knowledge of knowing best ways to support a dyslexic learner or learner with SPLD. That's my aim. Obviously, there are other areas that other professionals will be able to support with the speech and language and the the autism. But my area is being a specific learning difficulty specialist. That would be my aim, is to make sure, and that's why I support schools, I support teachers. I like to go and help, if I can, deliver some information on the teacher training courses, because there isn't anything. If they get an hour across their whole 4 years of training to be a teacher on dyslexia, they're lucky.
Oh, wow.
So look, obviously every course is different and every degree is different. I want to generalize it, but just generally, generally that the SPLD support or knowledge is not really given more than a couple of hours, if that, over
But yet that's such a huge I mean, do we know a percentage of the population who have these learning difficulties?
Yeah, well, in terms of, I can't give you in terms of other areas, but in terms of dyslexia, you're looking at about 10%. 10% is roughly in the UK is estimated to have dyslexia.
Wow, 10%.
So 10% of a third of a class of, say, on average 30, that's 3 in the class that will have it, and then others will have tendency type difficulty, dyslexia type difficulties.
And there's only that limited amount of training for the teachers about this, and yet because even just one child, 2 children who are switched off, bored,
yes,
or need that extra focus, that disrupts the whole class.
Yeah.
And then you've got the pressure on the teachers because, again, they've got things they've got to achieve.
Yes, they've got, and then there's all it's huge. It's a huge,
Dinner's burning, the washing's multiplying, and someone's crying. It could even be you. If your evenings feel like survival mode, the Command the Chaos Mum Life Management Planner is your first gentle step back to calm. It's a printable 80-page guide and planner to help you reset your routines and breathe again without needing to become someone else entirely. Start your reset today. The link's in the show notes.
Laura, if I could boot out Bridget Phillipson and make you Minister for Education, actually, is she still even Minister for Education? I'm losing track. But the point
I'm losing track. I don't trust any of them. So
no, I agree. So let's turn this. Okay. So the part of the reason this podcast is also, not keen on the word, to empower women, to empower mothers, but to encourage mums to say, yes, I can take control. More control of kind of family life, my life, and a bit more sort of sense of autonomy. Okay. So that's the reason. Now, I'm going to make you, nonetheless, Minister for Education. Mm-hmm. What kind of quick fixes could change within a school setting that would support these children?
So, we obviously start off the whole school, and then there's going into the classroom as well. But if I was to be Education Minister, or if I had a say in what goes on in Parliament today, and I was to be sent down there to give advice, to make specific learning difficulties, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, more out there, more known, teachers to be having more training on it, which is what happened many years ago with Sir Jim Rose. He was asked to investigate dyslexia and learning difficulties, and he produced a whole report, and it recommended that every school should have a dyslexia specialist teacher on board, and that's where all the training came in. That kind of seems to have now gone, because there are other areas out there that seem to it goes in like circles, at the moment. There's other, and I'm not saying that other areas aren't important, because absolutely they are, but it's about, I think everyone focuses on one thing for a few years, then that thing gets completely dropped and it gets forgotten, whereas everything needs to be remembered altogether. So all the neurodiverse difficulties need to be recognized, and to have policies on how schools should be. There should be a whole country or a whole world's policy on how to support children in the classroom at primary and secondary level with specific learning difficulties. That it's not up to, and not left for each school to decide whether they wish to follow it or not. It should be compulsory. Let's make sure. And a lot of the support that you might give a dyslexic learner is not just going to support that 10% of the classroom. It's going to support everybody in the classroom, but it's going to really help those dyslexic pupils really move on, as well as if they've got other areas of difficulty as well.
Yeah.
So it's
And I think another thought that kind of comes to mind as well is the idea of sort of a stigma.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't read by the time you're 7. You can't do this by the time you're... That's not... So what I've discovered, again, on the sort of the home education journey, and also in my own family, I've got relatives who could not read until they were 12 or 13. And it just went kind of overnight.
Yeah.
Just went click.
Yeah.
And in the home education world, it's been fascinating talking to mothers who've kind of left, when I say ignore their children, they haven't really, but it's like we will do a bit of reading every day.
Yeah.
But then it just clicks at about 13, 14. There's one lady who was saying her teenage boy all of a sudden is like, I better take this seriously because when I'm texting my friends.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. They need it and texting. And obviously things come with maturity, things develop as well. I'm not saying everyone's going to suddenly have that click, because that's not necessarily always going to be the case. But, sometimes it's great. But there are ways that we can support a dyslexic learner. And it's fine. It's almost making sure we find different ways of attacking or approaching an activity. That's, I can give you lots of what I would call general support ideas, and more specific ones for specific subject related. Are you with me?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, sorry, I'm going to come back just a couple of steps to the stigma.
Yes.
But if more people were conscious of the fact or aware that people reach different levels of maturity, readiness at different stages.
Yeah.
I think that, well, I don't know. Things would almost be easier.
I do think more and more is being talked about now in terms of just mental health and learning difficulties. And I think the stigma that we perhaps knew maybe in our generation when we were youngsters or beforehand, our grandparents, it definitely was a stigma. But I would like to think now there is more out there. People are more open. People are stigma of seeing a therapist, or it's becoming less and less of a stigma and more of a an acceptance, and people are now aware. So I'd like to think that the stigma of being it's for us to demystify that stigma, if that makes sense. To make it to turn it on its head, and it's not something bad. It's actually a strength. It's, as I mentioned to you the word before, it's a superpower. And I think more and more people are realizing that now. But again, it's it's your own child that's been diagnosed. It's, do I tell them that they've put them through the assessment process, put them through all of that, and then not to tell them that they've actually been diagnosed with dyslexia? I had a pupil whose mother it took her 3 years to tell her son that he had dyslexia. And the minute she told him, they made it a whole big reveal, gentle but kind reveal. And that child has completely changed for the better, knowing that he's got that. And she said, "Why didn't I tell him 3 years ago?" It was it was her own personal stigma, that it was her own personal kind of issue that she was holding on to. And had she told the son that he had it and approached it in a way, a friendly way and a fun way and an exciting way, there are books about it, there are video clips, actually it can become something to celebrate.
Yeah.
And it should be.
I remember a family we knew, and the boy was struggling, and then the school said, yes, he's got dyslexia. And one of the parents was devastated because at school they had been in special needs.
Yes.
Everybody had gone, oh, well, all of this. And all of a sudden you could see him become that child again.
Yes. Yeah.
And he was
and that's going to impact the child who's actually got it now. So it's often the case, especially with maths. Parents go, "Oh yeah, I was awful at maths at school, or I couldn't do this, or maths is awful, maths," and then that feeds onto the child, and the child begins to take on that message, don't they? And they adopt that attitude. So again, it's as a parent, it's really important to make sure that whatever messages we give our children, even if it's something personal you've experienced, not to necessarily let that go on to your child, because they'll pick up from you. So, supporting a dyslexic learner is it's all about making things fun, meaningful. I mean, we can go through some of the ways of supporting a dyslexic learner in a moment.
Actually, a few tips for the listeners, for the mums who've gone, something's happening here, or the mums who already know and are just like, bring it on. Let's have some more.
So I'll start off with the whole one first. I always say the best free gifts you can give a dyslexic learner are confidence, Okay, which is built on understanding. So if you are a parent and you suspect your child has got dyslexia or has got dyslexia or it displays dyslexic type tendencies, go and do your research first, your knowledge, and understand what it is why your child is finding X, Y, and Z difficult. So we and then to build confidence within your child based on understanding. Okay, so time is really important, because we know that they take time to process, they take time to respond. And if you put pressure on your child to respond quickly and a little bit like they do in school, you don't have much, that time can actually be the key to everything. So give yourself, that child, the confidence, built on understanding, time, and compassion. Those are what I would call the 3 free gifts that I would love all teachers to also give in the classroom. It's not always easy, but to not pick on a child and say, Harry, that's a name out the blue there, can you read this out now in front of the class? Or Harry, what's the answer to this question? Harry, I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to come back to you in 5 minutes for the answer, and let Harry have time to process that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
take your time, Harry. You've been warned, and then it'll come.
You've had that, or pre-teaching as well, pre-learning. Again, if a way that you've taught a child or supported a child home or at school hasn't worked, find a different way. There are lots of ways of teaching fractions. There are lots of ways of teaching how to spell words. Don't just stick to one way because that's the way that you feel most comfortable with, or you think is the best way. It might be for you. It might not be for your child or your pupil. So give yourself permission to think outside the box.
Can I ask a question? We talked earlier, you were saying, the child's at school all day and getting this kind of barrage, and then they come home and then there's homework. When I had my children at school, I would push back and say, no, we're not doing things. No, this isn't right for home life. No, I would do that.
Yep.
I'm not sure that the teachers or the head teachers were especially thrilled.
No.
But I would very much say, no, we're not going to do that because of X, Y, Z.
It's not going to, yeah.
Is that, I know I would encourage other mums to do that, to protect their children and their sanity and their home life and the confidence. What would you suggest would be a good...
I would suggest a middle ground there. I would suggest that the child does something of that piece of homework, but maybe it's done in a different way. So, for example, maybe they were expected to write, I don't know, a couple of paragraphs. Maybe they could dictate it, or you could type it and they could speak it out loud. Or maybe they were required to do something. Maybe they draw a picture instead. Or so I think the child. The key thing is we don't want the child to be punished, and we don't want the child to go back to school the next day knowing that they've not done the homework that all their peers have done, and they might get humiliated in the class by the teacher. Or where's your homework, Harry? I keep using the word Harry here because we're also why, and then that could be even worse. So sometimes, it not doing it at all could be worse than doing something but a little bit more sort of specific to how they learn. Does that make sense?
But as the parent, as the mum, you need to advocate and let the teacher know.
Yes. Oh, yes.
We're not going to be writing this.
Yeah.
It's been dictated. I am writing this. This is how the child...
100%.
Yep.
And I think if a child's got a diagnosis of dyslexia and the teacher knows that, and that it's all kind of not above board, but it's all kind of common knowledge, that's a lot easier, because it will be in the report, it will be in recommendations about how to support that child, and you can always refer back to that document. If a child is struggling but hasn't had the fortuitous opportunity to get a diagnosis, then it's a conversation. It's keeping that conversation open between parent and school, parent and class teacher, or head of year, or whoever it is that's has that child's interest there, and making them know that your child is struggling, first of all, and to make sure that they don't go on, because if they're quiet and they just get on with things, but they might mask it. They don't. You know your child best, right? A teacher knows every child, but it's divided into a fraction of 30, for argument's sake. You know your child the best, and if your child's coming home and having tantrums or meltdowns or whatever they're doing, and they're struggling, tell the teacher. have that conversation, write an email, have it on record. I always say put things in an email, or follow-up telephone conversations in an email. Have it recorded, have it written, and make the teacher know. If the teacher doesn't know, how they're going to know to do something differently, or to have those different expectations or outcomes.
Yeah. So very much collaborative.
Definitely. Teamwork is dreamwork. Limit copying. Copying is the biggest sin. Copying.
Why is that?
Because
in terms of copy work, here's a text that you need to copy for sort of handwriting and spelling. No, go on. Why not?
Well, it depends, I guess, what the copying is for. I guess if it's copying it to help with the memory for spelling, so you're reading it, you're saying it out loud, and then maybe you cover it and then write it out yourself. If that's part of the learning process, then great. But what I'm saying is, for example, if you've got a chunk of information on the whiteboard or a chunk of information on a sheet, and you just say to a child, "Can you just copy it?" So they're literally just copying. Yeah. What's the learning benefit of copying? Well, apart from taking it from one format into your exercise book, you're actually placing a huge demand on that child's working memory. And often working memory is an area that is a difficulty in dyslexic learners, and it places a huge burden. And it's what's the learning opportunity? I think you've got to ask yourself, what is the learning outcome or learning benefit from asking them to copy huge amounts of information? Even something like copying the date and the learning objective. I've done a lot of classroom observations where the class have been given a load of instructions. Right, class, now get on with it. But first you need to copy the date and the learning objective into your book. And then, I've seen one whole lesson where a child went completely unnoticed, spent the entire lesson copying the date and the long sentence, which was the learning objective. They didn't even get on to doing the task. And if they had, they would have forgotten what the task was. Are you with me? So if they don't
So I was just going to ask, coming back to working memory, what does that mean? Can you just define what that is?
Okay, so really quickly, well, not really quickly, working memory is like the mental workpad space in the brain. It's about being able to hold on to information, hear it, absorb it, manipulate it, and then exercise it, if that makes sense.
So
you've got
essentially,
go on.
No, I was just going to say what most mums have lost by about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, we use our working memory all day long. We use our working memory when we're reading, when we're spelling, when we're writing, when we're using it all day long without realizing it. But what's happening is we are holding on to. So, for example, you might say to your child, right, I want you, Harry, to go up the stairs. When you get to your bedroom, I want you to shut the window, put your books away, make your bed, and then come down for tea. Right? That's like 4 quite detailed instructions. Well, they might remember come down for tea. They might remember the close the window bit, but they might have forgotten the middle bits. That's because you're overloading their memory capacity, and they're having to listen to you, hold on, do something, do those jobs, and then finally, are you with me? So it's
I've got one child where I realised I could only give
two. Okay,
two maximum.
Yeah.
3, anything, and just chaos. But again, it took me a while to notice this pattern and going, there's a limit here, and it is 2.
Yeah, it's like imagining a computer with loads and loads of post-it notes. It's your mental workspace, and if that gets overloaded and burdened, which it will do naturally in a classroom in day-to-day learning, it's going to, because you've got the teacher giving instructions, you've been given tasks to do, you've got children talking in the back. There's loads going on. That's when the exhaustion. That's why we get so exhausted.
Fascinating.
So again, it's.
Do we need learning objectives? Do they need to be written down? Or couldn't the teacher just...
I think if the child just knows what and why can't you just stick them on? Why can't you've got printers that are really easy? Why can't they get printed out on labels and stuck in? You know what I mean? Why do you need a child to literally sit and write the learning objective? Just get on with the activity.
The actual
in a dyslexic friendly way if they're dyslexic learners.
So okay, Laura, lots for me personally to mull over and think about.
Absolutely.
Now, I also know that you run semi-regular workshops where parents, educators can come in and get extra support from you and extra skills from you.
Yeah.
If anybody was interested in partaking? How do they get in touch with you? What's the best thing to
So
do?
I have a website, www.dyslexiaunderstood.co.uk. And it's a very simple, dyslexic friendly, I like to think so anyway, website. There's only like 4 or 5 tabs, and explains, who I am, what I do. And then it has some list of workshops that I offer online. Obviously, if it's local schools, I can go in, but I'm based in Bushy in Hertfordshire. But online is great. I do a lot of online workshops, all to do with areas of different areas related to specific learning difficulties, things like what, dyslexia understood, maths difficulties or dyscalculia understood. We've got one on working memory and memory and learning. There's a range of different, and I can always put something together if there's a specific area of interest that's not necessarily shown on my website. I'm also an accredited trainer on the evidence-based reading comprehension program. So I deliver online training 2 or 3 times a year to show teachers, or I've had home educators on there as well, how to support their students, their pupils, their children with reading comprehension skills. That's often an area that's really overlooked. And that's not just for dyslexic learners. Comprehension is often an area of weakness and difficulty because the children are not given the strategies that they need in order to be able to read and understand with greater meaning from what's going on in the text. So I'm a accredited trainer on that, and I deliver that every so often.
Why is that? Is that because there's so much time spent kind of processing the word, the sentence in the paragraph?
They generally don't get taught the skills that are needed in order. So what happens is a lot of people just read and bark at the print, and they don't necessarily absorb the information. They don't have the strategies like visualization. They don't have the strategies of being able to think like a detective and engage with the text. So, and obviously working memory is going to be a huge impact. And we're talking about pupils here that can read almost at age appropriate level or decode anyway. It's not a phonics program. That's something totally different. And I advise on interventions, other interventions as well. I've got a very good maths one that's brilliant that I've just actually had a meeting just before you with the producer of. The comprehension one, what happens in school when children are given text? They're often given the text, they might talk about it, and then just a list of questions, and then that's the opportunity. They've got to go away and just answer the questions. Well, that's great when you've got the skills, the underlying skills in order to be able to answer those questions. But if we don't teach those skills explicitly from a young age and encourage them, that pupil is going to find it really difficult to read for meaning, sort of making those really important inferences. So it's fine to make those literal retrieval questions where you have to look in the text and just find the answer, which is there. What color was the bus? Oh, the bus was red. Oh, but it's more of what we'd call the inference style questions.
Yeah.
So there is an very affordable, evidence-based, I think it's the only one of the only, should I say, evidence-based intervention programs out there, with an online electronic resource folder that has over 75 texts that you access, plus all the materials needed, which is not a lot, but it's to deliver the intervention. So then, and the texts are suitable for children in years 3 to years, well, it actually goes up to GCSE now.
So that's finishing at 16ish.
Yeah.
How old are they? Year 3? I'm so
year
out of the system.
Year 3 is 8, 7 rising 8.
Okay.
But it's not to say that's because at that point we assume that they're able to start reading independently and access. Yeah. It's not to say that, however, that children of I train infant schools, the reception foundation to year 2, so they're much younger kids, not necessarily to access the texts, but how for the teachers to be able to use those strategies and skills in the classroom, so that by the time they are independent readers and can access texts, they actually don't need the intervention because they're already used to having those skills embedded in part of their day-to-day learning.
Would that be, sorry, I just want to take to make sure I'm sort of tracking with this. So, for example, if you're reading a story and say the woman was sad, and then you would say to the child, how do you think that feels? What does that feel like? What would she look like? It's those kinds. So it's taking that bit.
Yeah. Yeah, or how do we know the woman is sad? It might not necessarily have said in the passage categorically or explicitly that the woman was sad. It might have said something like, she had her face was buried in her lap, and she had no smile on her face. How do we? What are the clues that we know that the woman? Yeah, but there's a lot more to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But thank you. All right. That's fantastic. Laura, at some point, I think you need to come on and talk about dyscalculia.
Oh, yes. I'd love to.
I can see like an entire series here. It's like dyslexia, dyscalculia.
Dyscalculia. Yeah.
How did you say it?
Dyscalculia.
Dyscalculia and then dyspraxia and dysgraphia. And it sounds like they all kind of have different.
Yes,
they're affecting different bits of the brain.
Absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily, for dysgraphia, not dysgraphia, dyspraxia, you would probably need to speak to an OT, an occupational therapist or physiotherapist. They would be probably, I can, but I wouldn't say I'm the most specialist in it. Dyscalculia, it was part of my specialist training, so that's absolutely something I can give a presentation on and feel that I am qualified to speak to an audience. And then there's dysgraphia, which is not often, again, an OT, an occupational therapist, is to do with the writing, the physical elements. So again, that's probably the least one that's least spoken about. I'm not saying it's not important, but least spoken about. But yeah, I'd love to give a podcast on dyscalculia, because that's really
that's really, the whole maths thing. That'd be brilliant.
And a lot of dyslexic learners might have not have dyscalculia, but they will have dyscalculic tendencies because of their processing difficulties or their reading difficulties makes maths for them more difficult. But it doesn't mean to say they've got necessarily dyscalculia. So dyscalculia and maths difficulties would be kind of a topic, because
Okay, we shall come back. I have one last question and then we shall wrap up.
Okay.
I'm going to come back again to the English being not phonetic. In other countries, are there similar levels of dyslexia? Is it as much of a challenge in the classroom? Do we know?
I haven't got any specific statistics to reference to, so I wouldn't want to make any kind of claim. English is definitely a hard language. We've got, I don't know how many sounds we've got in our English language. It's definitely more complicated. Other languages are not quite as complicated. But again, it's everywhere. It is everywhere. And as I say, it's not just about the mapping of the sounds, whatever. It's also to do with processing and memory. So it encompasses a much broader range now. So I can't speak for other countries. I just know that in this country, there's a lot more known about it. There's a lot more understood about it. There's a lot more training on it. So it's definitely on the rise here.
Okay, fantastic. Laura, bless you. I thoroughly enjoyed that. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for inviting
there'll
me.
be details in the show notes, so we can follow Laura and get in touch if you've got any more questions.
Great.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, God bless. Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, give it a like, share it with a mum who needs it, and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. It's the simplest way to help this podcast reach more mums who are ready to reclaim the kitchen and rebuild the village.